Ladies and gentlemen, how are you? Are you better? Are you enjoying the contents of this platform? Kindly consider subscribing, like the videos, share them widely because they have very deep information that can actually help transform the entire generation. Help those people protect themselves from these issues that we can actually prevent by making them get information. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming back. If you're new here, this is a platform that you will never regret joining. Karibu sana, welcome on board, and I want to talk to you about a topic called drug interactions. Drug interactions. Now realize this, I have always wanted to talk about this conversation because it's a very, very detailed conversation. However, today we'll just do the simple basics of it, and someday hopefully we can actually go into the deeper details of drug interactions. Now, the medicines that we take every time for any condition whatsoever, if you're taking that medication through the mouth, that medication has to get to the stomach. It has to dissociate and release the active ingredient. If you have a tablet, inside that tablet, we have an active drug. So if you have like Panadol, I'll use that for example, the tablet itself, it's even more than 500 milligrams. Inside that tablet, we have paracetamol equivalent to 500 milligrams. So then we use that paracetamol, we add more additives, and now these additives will make the tablet. So we have the tablet and then we have the drug inside the tablet. That's the difference, okay? Now, this drug inside this tablet has to be released from the tablet, and that happens in the stomach. So these drugs, when they get into the stomach, the acid works on them, the peristaltic movement of the gut works on it. The drug has been designed to actually get into the stomach and release the active ingredient. Now that active ingredient will dissolve in the stomach fluids or the gut content, and then it's now absorbed into the gut wall. When it's absorbed, every single drug that you take through the mouth must go through the liver. Please, unless it's a drug that is designed to actually just act on the gut and get out through stool. Most of the drugs, let me use the word most of the drugs that you take through the mouth, they have to be taken deeper into the bloodstream and then head all the way to the liver through the portal system for metabolism. Now, understand that most drugs that you are taking through the mouth are not in their active states. So they must go into the liver so that they can be activated. Realize that is what we call metabolism. And in metabolism, we can either activate the drug or deactivate the drug. If we are activating the drug, we will now send it into the system so that it goes and binds on the receptors, and on the receptors, it can now elicit an activity, an action. All right. Now, if we are deactivating the medication in the liver, it means we are now getting it out of the system, excreting it out through feces or through urine. All right. So look at it this way. We take a medication, it gets into the stomach, it dissociates, it dissolves, it is absorbed across the gut wall. So if you have a very messed up gut, most of this medication will not be very effective. So it goes into the portal system, it's carried all the way to the liver for metabolism, either activation or deactivation, either to be used or to be excreted, okay? Once it gets into the liver, now medication in the liver, now the liver classifies this medication into different categories. We have two categories in the liver because in the liver, we have enzymes that help in metabolism of medication. This enzyme, there's a system of enzymes. That system is called the CYP450, cytochrome P450. That's an enzyme system. It has different enzymes to do different roles, okay? So now, in this enzyme system is activated by the same medication that you're taking. So we have two. So we have those drugs that are called the inducers of the CYP450, or we have the inhibitors. So some of the medications that we take are coming in to block this system so that it doesn't metabolize any medication. Other medications are coming in to activate this system so that it can actually metabolize medication. Now, this is where the interactions are coming in. Realize this, that those medications that are coming into the liver to induce, to activate this system for metabolism of drugs, they will make sure that most of the drugs that are actually broken down or metabolized by this system are broken down so fast, released so fast, and excreted from the system so fast. Because as a result of the metabolic pathway, metabolism of medication can yield active medication or inactive medication. can yield soluble medication or insoluble medication. If they are soluble, they are going to dissolve in blood and they are going to be released from the kidneys through urine. That is fast, okay? So the more soluble the drug is, the faster it leaves the system. So the liver can actually make drugs very soluble so that they leave the system so fast. It can also make them very insoluble so that they are retained into the system. It can make them fat soluble so that the drug holds on to the fat, is released slowly, like the depot, released slowly into the system. Or it can make it be released from the fat so that it actually excreted so fast. So if drugs are coming in to induce this system, it means most medication are going to be broken down so fast and released so fast. The danger is if you're breaking down medication so fast and releasing them so fast from the liver, they might not end up attaining the therapeutic level that will be used to actually elicit an action. Number two, there are drugs that are coming in to inhibit this system. So if they're inhibiting this system, it means most of the drugs that we are actually absorbing into the system are not going to be metabolized. All right. Therefore, they're going to pile up in the system. When they pile up, because they're not being able to be excreted, when they pile up, toxicity of this medication is going to happen. All right. Side effects are going to be experienced, including the liver problems. All right. So therefore, this system is very important. But now the medications that we are taking in are either activating that system to ease up the burden on medication, or they are blocking that system to raise the burden of the medication in your system. Once you understand that, you've actually grasped medication or drug interactions. Now realize this, that is drug-drug interaction. We have now drug-food interaction, where the medications that you're actually taking in are either interacting with the food that you're eating to help this medication either become active and work, or become inactive and they are released from the system. They are foods that either activate the enzyme system in the liver or they block the enzyme system in the liver. So let's say, for example, a drug like doxycycline. You've heard a doctor saying, for you to take doxycycline, sometimes ciprofloxacin, avoid taking it with milk. Why does the doctor say that? It's because this drug in the gut, where it's being now released, it dissociates to release the medication, the doxycycline active ingredient. There are foods like milk that come in and form inactive chelates, because milk is coming in with a very small percentage of calcium. And this calcium comes in and binds with the doxycycline, making it insoluble. And remember, for you to absorb something from the gut, it must be soluble in the gut content. Now you've made the doxycycline inabsorbable because it's insoluble, and now it's excreted out through stool. Now you'll end up having no action of this doxycycline in your system. So if you had maybe a reproductive health issue, an infection, or you had typhoid, or you had brucellosis, and you wanted, or the intention of taking doxycycline is to actually destroy this or suppress it so that the immune system takes over, that means this doxycycline will not be taken in enough, because most of it is binding to the calcium and being excreted through stool. Now, a small percentage is going to go into the bloodstream, is going to actually elicit an action, but it will not reach the therapeutic levels in the blood. Therefore, the bacteria that is actually going to target will become resistant to it. When it becomes resistant, that means the next time you're taking doxycycline, you will not have any effect of this doxycycline. That's why most of you either come back with a lot of recurrent brucellosis or all these reproductive health issues, because you are resistant to the medication. That's a danger. But the point of this conversation is, if you have foods that totally induce the enzyme system in the liver to break down the medications you're taking. So let's say you're taking like a drug, let's say an antidepressant, and then you end up taking it with maybe grape juice. Grape juice is going to actually induce these enzymes in the liver. Once you induce the enzymes, you break down the drug so fast, therefore there's no effect. The drug is released from the system so fast through urine or through stool. So drug interaction is a very, very effective thing that should be actually be educated to the public so that they understand. This one with drug resistance, they should actually be educated to the masses. Most of you have used a lot of amoxicillin over the counter. You've injected yourself a lot of ceftriaxone, different brands. Now your system is actually now resistant to this. So the microorganisms that you're actually exposed to are resistant to this medication. Therefore, even if you use high doses of this medication, you are already having species of these microorganisms that are multiplying so fast and they are resistant to the medication, and now you suffer. Now, in case you don't respect antibiotics and you constantly overuse and misuse them, wait until you're admitted to that hospital ward with a chronic condition, let's say like maybe chronic sepsis or even pneumonia, and now all medications that you actually have exposed yourself to are now resistant, my friend, you will now realize you have actually messed your system so big. All right, you will now have to go for other medications that are antibiotics, that are reserve antibiotics, that are very expensive and also very unavailable, and also they have toxic side effects, higher side effects than the normal ones that you've been using, that you're now resistant. So protect antibiotics as you protect yourself, because you're not designed to take antibiotics all the time. Realize they also mess the gut environment. They destroy good and bad bacteria in your gut at the same time. Therefore, you have gut problems, right? That's why after taking antibiotic dose for about 10 days, it's time for you now to take the fermented food to replenish the gut microorganisms that were destroyed by these antibiotics. So there are drugs that interact. For example, another dangerous interaction that I would actually mention is like in terms of distribution of drugs. You see, after the drugs has been metabolized, it is bound to either a protein and then now transported throughout the blood. So a drug like NSAIDs, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, they have a very big problem with warfarin. Warfarin is a drug that is used to thin blood to help people prevent themselves from strokes or all these problems. So non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, they have a very uh, great interactions with warfarin. So what they do is they compete for the binding sites on the protein that is supposed to transport it in blood. So imagine if you are somebody who is taking warfarin and you end up taking an NSAID, and then they end up interacting, and now the NSAID is blocking the transportation of warfarin throughout the system. What are you going to get? You're going to get those clots and you get into problems, right? So these are things that are very technical, but even doctors don't even get them clear. The pharmacists don't get them clearly. Some of the antibiotics like tetracyclines, basically doxycycline is there. Take them with either the iron supplements. So somebody's taking doxycycline and then you're taking iron supplements for blood. A lot of problems. You see, doxycycline and milk. Some of you have talked about an interaction between metronidazole, famously known as Flagyl, with alcohol. So when you end up getting the disulfiram effect, you end up having a hangover for 3 days, shivering and fevers, hot flashes. You will not ever think about that alcohol again. That's why possibly it was thought that this metronidazole or disulfiram can be used to reverse chronic alcoholism because of that interaction. Okay, so these are things that you should actually understand to actually help you overcome this. So the inducers and the inhibitors, that is one thing that you pick out of this video. Number two, if you're told by a doctor that this medication should not be taken with milk, please avoid the milk, take the dose. Once you've taken the dose, you can come back to your milk later. And then take, if it's an antibiotic that you're taking, now you take the fermented foods to actually replenish your gut. All right. But however, I want you to understand this, that there are drugs that their interaction is very healthy, but there are drugs that the interaction can actually destroy you. For example, you see there's something called additive effect. Additive means effects of one drug plus effects of another drug give you double effects. You see? Now, look at it this way. For example, you've been taking drugs for sedation and hypnosis, like diazepam, right? And then you go ahead and take, because it suppresses the CNS so that you get sleep. And then you go and take alcohol. So imagine taking alcohol plus diazepam. This is for people who actually abuse diazepam to get sleep. You go and take alcohol, then you take diazepam at the same time. What is going to happen is you're going to suppress your respiratory centers, you're going to suppress your activity, your CNS totally, and now you can go into a coma. Now, this is one of the reasons why, you know, mchele. Mchele is a drug that is called, what is it called? Flunitrazepam, Rohypnol. Most people use mchele. Most women in the clubs, when they want to steal from a man, they use this Rohypnol, the mchele. They put it into alcohol. Remember, it's highly soluble in alcohol. So they put a tablet of it into alcohol. It dissolves so fast. And when you take that glass of alcohol with that Rohypnol, the effects are going to be double. So you're going to get the hypnosis. You're going to suppress your breathing centers, and now you become a zombie. Now, these people can actually steal anything from you the way, however they want. Whichever thing they want from you, they'll take from you. When you wake up from that stupor, because now your respiratory centers are coming back slowly, you're in a stupor. You're waking up and you realize your house is full of echo. It's because of this drug interaction between alcohol and drugs that are called the benzodiazepines, diazepam being the major part of this. We have another drug, like some interactions are very healthy. Like you see in a drug called septrin, we have two drugs in septrin. We have trimethoprim and sulfamethoxazole. I don't want you to cram those names. I just want to know that these two drugs, all of them act synergistically to help you. Also, there are tablets of paracetamol that they combine paracetamol with caffeine, right? Or aspirin with caffeine, right? I don't know the brands, but you can read on the brands. Once you read the ingredients of your medication, you'll see. I don't know if it's Panadol Advance or Panadol Extra. They combine aspirin plus paracetamol plus caffeine. And of course, effects of aspirin and caffeine go hand in hand. But also these interactions can be used in medicines to actually help you overcome some of these issues that you get, maybe a poisoning. For example, a drug like naloxone can be used for somebody who has taken excess tramadol or excess morphine or pethidine. There are doctors who inject pethidine to feel high. So that can actually be reversed by giving naloxone as an antidote, right? Some of this, like alcohol, you take alcohol and you're given more alcohol to actually just undo the effects of methanol plus ethanol. You know that interaction, we've talked about it before, all right? And then there's drugs like atropine to come in and do the antagonistic interaction to block you from poisons, which are the organophosphate. For somebody who has actually ingested the pesticides and all that, they can actually be given atropine to reverse the effects of that interaction. But the most important one here is the alcohol, because alcohol plays like a whole load of issues with the interaction of medication. For example, alcohol, we just talked about the benzodiazepine, the rohypnol. So alcohol can actually be dangerous in that, muchele. Alcohol with flagyl problems. Alcohol with antihistamines. Remember, antihistamines are causing you sedation, and alcohol is causing you sedation. Double problems and double tragedy. But above all, I want you to see these what do we call them? Let's call them the harmful effects of drug interactions. The harmful effects of drug interactions, because this is where we need to base our argument, so that as we speak, you can easily know that this can actually bring you a problem. For example, toxicity and organ damage. When you're using drugs for hypertension, they are called the ACE. By the way, there's a video that I did about the mode of action of antihypertensives. ACE inhibitors are what we call the angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, the enalapril. Most of you are on enalapril. So if you're using enalapril and then you end up using also an NSAID, the painkillers, this is why people who are using drugs for hypertension should be very careful. If you're using drugs for hypertension, specifically these ACE inhibitors, enalapril, and then you're going to take brufen, diclofenac, meloxicam, those drugs for pain, be very careful, because those two medications can actually hurt your kidneys, right? So be very careful when you're taking this medication. That means do not just go and buy drugs over the counter. And if you're buying them, remind the pharmacist or the pharmaceutical technologist that, you know what, I am on drugs for hypertension and these are the drugs for hypertension, so that they know. And I know most of them don't know these things. They will simply ignore and give you that because of the cells. But now you have the information, you should know that. Number two, reduced effectiveness and efficacy. For example, you are taking antacids for peptic ulcer disease, and then you go ahead and take iron supplements. What are you doing? You're going to block absorption of these iron supplements. Therefore, you're going to have no effect in terms of your blood level going up. For example, if you're taking Relsagel and at the same time you're taking Ranferon, it's a waste of your time. You're going to get no effect from the Ranferon. Avoid it, okay? And we've talked about how to raise blood levels without having to use supplements, and how to reverse chronic gastritis, the reflux disease, without using the antacids. Interaction number three, unpredictable side effects. Unpredictable side effects. So drugs can actually interact. Two drugs can interact to give you very unrealistic and very unpredictable side effects. Drugs for depression, they are the ones that are very well known to cause very unpredictable side effects. They can cause you death so easily. So there is a group of drugs that is called the MAO inhibitors, monoamine oxidase inhibitors, and there's drugs that is called the SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, drugs for depression. If you combine any drug from those two groups, death sentence. Number four, increased risk of bleeding. So imagine you're taking aspirin to help you in thinning blood so that it will prevent a stroke. And then again, you go ahead and take the NSAIDs, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which cause more blood thinning. That will mean you will end up either bleeding excessively, or you will have an inability to actually control bleeding. So they actually cause you increased risk of bleeding. So if you ever have a cut and you're on aspirin and you're still on painkillers like NSAIDs, there'll be a serious problem in terms of bleeding. You'll not be able to stop that bleeding. So avoid it. And then, of course, increased hospitalization and also increased healthcare burden, because once you experience these toxicities, let's say you're having a liver problem or a kidney problem as a result of overconsumption of medication, the bill is going to become so heavy on you. You cannot handle that bill. You can make a lot of money over a long period of time, but health can sweep off that money in a very short period of time. Okay. And of course, the last harmful effect of this drug interaction can be death. We just talked about the MAO inhibitors for depression and the SSRIs for depression. You can get to death. If you talk about alcohol and benzodiazepines, you take them, chele and alcohol, you end up suppressing your respiratory centers and you're gone. So I think it's very, very important for you to actually look at the type of medication that you're using. That's why I tell you, if you have more than 4 medications on a prescription, there is no way these drugs cannot interact. Some of these drugs are actually activating the enzyme system in the liver or inhibiting that system. Either way, you'll get side effects of this medication, or you'll end up getting no therapeutic benefit from this medication. But of course, we cannot just demonize these interactions without mentioning the benefits. One benefit is we can use them in poisoning. All right, we simply use a drug that blocks this drug from attaching to receptors. We do away with the poisoning, naloxone and opioids. Number 2, decrease side effects. Most of the times when they combine medication, they lower the dosages, right? When they lower the dosages in that one tablet, now side effects are reducing. But that is not to mean that this drug is actually safe. Number 3, synergy, like in antiretrovirals. In ARV drugs, we want synergistic effect. We want this group of medication to actually activate the activity of this medication so that we get a double effect instead of a single effect from individual drugs. So that synergistic effect can actually be used to protect you, right? Even though we have our questions about treatment and regimens of antiretrovirals, you should now know. And then increased absorption. So of course, some of the medication can actually increase absorption of other medication in the gut. Some of the foods can actually increase absorption of other medication in the gut. For example, if you're taking, let's say, fatty meats, let's say Greek yogurt with antimalarials, you're actually increasing the absorption in the gut. If you're eating food and then taking ABZ, you're actually increasing the absorption of ABZ, therefore the more action. On ABZ, most of you take ABZ in the morning, early in the morning before your worms are hungry, because you're thinking that the worms are going to feed on the tablet and then they die. That is not true. You need to take ABZ on a full stomach so that food will enhance absorption of albendazole. Once this albendazole gets into the bloodstream, it goes into the liver for activation and now comes back into the bloodstream. The parasites, the worms, will suck albendazole from blood. Once they suck it from blood, now they start getting paralysis. So they die from sucking blood because worms don't eat tablets. Worms suck blood. So this drug has to get into the bloodstream so that it can actually be used or sucked by the worms through blood, and then they get paralyzed. So there are benefits and there are also odds, but you weigh the benefits against the risks and then you administer medication. But as you do that, just know that if you have more than 4 medications on a prescription, you're actually setting yourself up for problems in terms of drug interactions. So those people who have hypertension, those people who have diabetes, those people who have hyperlipidemia, they end up having atorvastatin, then they end up having an antihypertensive medication, maybe 2 or 3. They end up having another combination for drugs for diabetes. You already have 6 medication, but you're taking 3 tablets. In these 3 tablets, you have a combination. Now you have 6 medication. Those medications are going to hurt your liver. They're going to hurt your kidneys. They're going to cause interactions that actually hurt you, and they can actually cause you problems in the system. So then what do? Reverse the cause of the condition instead of waiting for the symptoms to try and actually mask the symptoms. This is drug interactions. I know it's a deeper conversation, and I hope that one day on a live I can break it down in a language that you can actually understand. But use this as a backup, as a baseline to actually understand drug interactions.